All right, welcome back. We're still in Lesson 2 in our C# series, and we're going to look at what's called Data Entry Part 1. And I wanted to show you on your C# webpage where we're at. You should have looked at the videos in Lesson 1, all of these guys, and then we looked at the first day demo. That was the last video I did. I'm making a new video for you right now on Data Entry 1. That's where we're going to be. If you want to download the project, this is where you download it, and you're just going to click it, and you're going to say I want to save it to the desktop or save it somewhere, and then you can unzip it. You've got to remember to extract it or unzip it so that you can then start it up in Visual Studio. Okay, so let's take a look now at what we're going to do with this particular application. Before we build it together, I want to show you some of its features. When you start 2015, if you're using that, you may see that this window pops over here, this diagnostic window, and I think that it's probably very handy when you're building your app that's very complicated, or to test it at the end of when you're finished working with it. It'll show you how much processor time it takes, how much memory it uses, and so forth. But right now I'm just going to X that out, get rid of it, and I'm going to push F5 to show you the project that we're going to be looking at, and then we're going to build it together from scratch. So this has some of the features of the first day demo, but I want to make sure that you understand this stuff right from the beginning. Two features that I added to this. One is when this application runs, the form, this Windows form, will start in the center of the screen. So I got to show you how to set that property, set that attribute. Then I also changed what it said up here because I didn't want it to say form 1, because that looks pretty bad. So I'll show you how to do that. And then when they type in a name here in this text box, if they click OK, it's going to bring up what's called a message box. Message boxes are built into Windows, and I want to make sure you know how to use them because you're going to use them all over the place. This one allows you to change a couple things. First of all, I changed its caption or title, that I call it, up here to say using C#. Obviously I have a message, and all I did was to take whatever they typed into this text box up here and append it to a little sentence called hi there. So if they type in Tom, Karen, hope you're okay, have a nice life, that's what's going to show up in the message box. You can also choose the icon you want. I'll show you how to do that. By default, it just puts an OK button there, and you'll notice the message box starts up in the center of the screen. You don't have any particular choice about that. And when I hit the Enter key or I click OK, Mr. Message Box goes away. All that is done for you. The only programming code we have to be concerned with is we're going to say message box, I want to show you, and these are the icons I want, these are the buttons I want, and this is the message. So everything else is done for you. The other features on this include, if they click print, I want you to know how to take something from a text box, in this case Tom, and append that to another message that says thanks for shopping, and I want you to be able to put it in a label. So I need you to know how to move things around. So to take data from one control, show it somewhere else, or put it somewhere else in memory. That's a very, very basic but super important skill. The other feature is when they hit clear, we're going to clear our form. I told it clear this text box, then go down and clear this big label here, and then put the blinking cursor back up here. So I want to show you those commands so that you'll have those, because again, you'll use them millions of times. And then finally, the quit button is not going to ask, are you sure you want to quit, yes or no? It's just going to simply stop your application. So we got to make sure you know how to stop one of those applications. Okay. Now, one thing before we start, if you look at the menu system on whatever version you have, it may or may not match mine. You may come up here and just hit the new menu and you may see project. Or on yours it might say new project. It might be right here on the file menu. You have a lot of different options for how these menus look. I want to show you how to set them and reset them because you may not like the way yours are. If you go to the tools menu and you go down to import export settings, this is where this is. And you want to do what's called reset all your settings. I've never used these other ones. So you just hit next. I don't bother making a backup of them. I'm not in love with them like that, so I'm just going to hit next. And then you choose what you want. Now in this case, if I choose C#, it'll have some of the features and shortcut keys and stuff that we use in C#. If I was to choose Visual Basic, it would customize everything to Visual Basic. All of the menus and all the system, the videos that I've created on my website were all done with Visual Basic style, even if I did them in C# or C++. And so I like using that because that will match up with what I have on the rest of my website. But you feel free to do whichever one you like, okay? I've never used the general one, so I don't know what that is. So you would click Finish right here, and then it says your settings have been successfully reset, and then you hit Close, and it will very quickly close your application window here and then open it again. And now when we hit the File menu, you'll see I have a new project, new website, new file, open project, and this is what I started with in the early days when I started with Visual Studio, and this is just what I'm used to, and so that matches what's on the website. You feel free to do it however you wish, okay? Now, those are the features. That's what we're going to end up with. Let's build it together. Now, what I would like you to do is to start Visual Studio with me and do this along with the video. You pause the video when you need to catch up or to fix a problem, and then you play it again, or you back up the video so that you can see something that you missed. Make sure you have a tablet or a notebook with you because you need to take some notes, okay? Now, start Visual Studio from your menu, wherever you have it, and whatever version you're using, it doesn't matter. For what we're doing, it's fine. It may or may not come up with what's called the Start page. I have found this to be mostly useless to me because most of the stuff on there I don't even understand or use. It seems very complicated. Very seldom do I find something that's worth looking at, so you'll probably just want to close that. Go to the File menu, and you're looking for a new project. I want to warn you, don't pick new website, ping project, new file, none of that. If you want to open an existing project, then of course you would do it here. Okay? Now this open thing is for something else because I have a professional version, so we're not even going to look at that. So let's just say we want a new project. Since I picked Visual Basic as my editor style, notice what it does. It came up here. Yours will probably come up initially as Visual Basic. And what you want to do, because we want the C#, you're going to look under other languages. So be careful when you get doing this so that you pick the right thing. You can see you can build a ton of things. You can do gaming, you can build in Python now, Visual F#, which is a relatively new language, C#, and under C# we can build all kinds of things in Windows. So if you open this up, you get Windows things. But you can build something for the web, which we're not going to do. You can build for Android apps now, for the cloud, so you can write things to Azure and for cloud computing. You can, if you add some software called Xamarin, you can build Apple applications in C# now. LightSwitch is something that's more for businesses and stuff. You can build projects that will integrate with Office, so you could have something on the toolbar in Word or Excel and sell it or give it to people so they could add some features to that. Okay, so there's a ton of stuff. In my C++ class, you're going to come down here and you would have even more possibilities. You can write a lot of apps in JavaScript. So Microsoft really wanted you to have the opportunity to pick the language that you feel comfortable with and then use that across all platforms and all devices. That's really what this is about. Now you got to look very carefully here under C# so we don't get the wrong one. If you open up Windows, it says there's a universal. This is for Windows 10. And this, if you build a universal app under Windows 10, it will run on any Windows 10 device. That's what it's there for. It's the newest thing. Very cool. If you want to write something for Windows 8 or 8.1, you can also do a universal app or one for the phone. See that? What we want to do right now in this class is I want you to pick the one that says Classic Desktop right here. Okay? So it's kind of underneath the Windows thing, but not under Windows 8. So Classic Desktop, and then over here with all these options that you have, I want you to pick Windows Form Application, and hopefully it's at the top. The next thing I need you to do is to give it a name. You want your project to be something named appropriately. Do not send me any project or homework that says Windows Application 1 or Application 2. I see students do that and they have 15 of them on their laptop. Application 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, and they have no idea which one they just worked on, and so you don't want to do that. That's not very professional. So I'm going to put data entry part 1, and mine is going to say for the video, so I'm using this for the video that I'm making for you, and that's why I'm going to do that. You don't have to do that. Call yours data entry part 1, call it lesson 2, call it data entry 1 for my C# class, whatever you want to call it, okay? And then say OK. And very quickly Visual Studio will take that template and turn it into a real Windows application. If I were to run it right now just to test it, and if I hit the start button up here, or if I push F5 on the keyboard, you'll see that I have a fully functioning Windows application here that I can move around. Obviously it doesn't do anything, but it's all sitting there. And I also want to point out there's a new thing in 15 called the diagnostic window, and it'll show you how much memory your app is using, how much time the CPU is working on your application. And this would be very interesting to look at after you get finished so that you can optimize your application, but I don't want to look at it now because we have enough to learn without doing that. So just use the X. If that pops up, just get rid of it, okay? I want you to work on designing this form so that we can build this together and end up with the same kind of thing that I showed you a second ago. Okay, make sure that your program is stopped. You see what happened to me? See, it's running. If I try to go back in and make changes, it's going to say, wait a minute, you can't do that while it's running. So put the little stop button here, and now we're in what's called design mode. Make your app screen, make your form just a little bigger because we got to put some controls on here. And the first two features I want to teach you, and I want you to write these down, make sure that you have these, is I want to show you how to make the form start in the center of the screen. That's the first thing. And then we'll change what the form says. I don't want it to say form 1 because that looks very rinky-dink. Okay? Now I want to just say one thing about this whole programming thing. I'm going to show you the way I approach this. It doesn't mean it's the best way. It's certainly not the only way. But if I show you how I do it, that gives you a good head start on all the other people around the world who don't have a clue on how to do this. Then you figure out what works for you and how you want to work, and it'll be just fine because there's no right or wrong way to approach this. Now, the first thing I want to teach you is I want to change the properties of this form. So it starts in the center, and we're going to change what this says. So push the F4 key after you click on your form. Don't do any double clicking yet. Okay? Push F4 on your keyboard, or you can right click on the form and go to properties. Same thing. But I use F4. And it brings up a properties window over here on the right that you can see. Make sure it says form 1 there. I've highlighted it for you. Okay? When you're changing properties on a button or a text box or whatever, make sure you click that particular item and that you're changing the properties or characteristics for that particular object and not the wrong thing. So I'm going down here, and for my form, in order to have it start in the middle of the screen, I'm going to change what's called the start position property. You see it right there? And make sure you write this down, how to center the form on a screen, no matter how big the screen is. And you're going to go hit this drop down here, and you'll see you have several options. I want you to choose center screen because they have figured out how to code this for you. In the old days, you had to figure it out yourself. Now you don't have to. Don't choose center parent. That's something very different. So hit center screen, that's all. And then I want you to go right down here below this where it says text. Now the text property, as I had mentioned in earlier videos, that's what you change when you want to make something look different or say something different on the screen. Well, I want the form not to say form 1. I want it to say something else. What I do is I just simply double click where the text property is, and it highlights this over here, which means I can start typing. You no longer have to go in and erase this and type. Once this is highlighted, you can just type. So I'm going to say welcome to C# data entry number 1. And after I type that, I'm going to hit the enter key to lock it in, and you'll see immediately that that has changed on the form. And just to test it, I'm going to push F5 on the keyboard, and you'll see, ta-da, form comes up very quickly. There's my new caption or title for it, and it started in the center of the screen. Since there's no exit button, the way you want to exit this is you just click on this little guy here, this little X button on your form, or you can come up here. If you can't see the form for some reason, you can always come up here and stop it. Remember, you have to stop it in order to make changes. We're in design mode, now we're in run mode, and that's how you're going to learn to program. You design stuff, you save it, you run it, see how it works. You don't like it, you stop it, go back, make changes, add more features, whatever, until it's done. That's just kind of the work cycle. Okay. Now, what I want to teach you right away is how to save your project without getting into trouble. I don't want you to ever come over here to the File menu and do anything like this. Don't ever say Save Form 1 or Save As. Never, never, never. There are a ton of pieces and parts to your application, and if you miss one, the whole application is ruined. So the only thing I want you to do is I want you to hit these double floppy disks up here where it says Save All. Okay? And what I would suggest you do is you make changes and then you save them. Now, when I went and saved this the first time, Visual Studio says, well, where do you want to save it, son? And if you look, I don't want to put it where it says it normally puts it. Where it normally puts it is in the Documents folder under Visual Studio 2012, 13, 15, whichever version you have, and in its project folders. Okay. I don't want that. I'm going to put it on a folder on the desktop. I would strongly suggest that you do the same thing. Make a folder someplace under C# for lesson 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Put all your projects in there and name them carefully. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and I already have a folder there for CS videos under lesson 2. And I'm going to put it under my video folder right here where I did the other one. And it's going to say Data Entry Part 1 for video. So you will have Data Entry Part 1, I suppose, but you won't need the for video. Final thing to tell you, make sure this little puppy is checked. So it'll make a folder for you for every one of your projects. That keeps everything separate, makes it nice for you. So hit save, and in just a second or two, it's now saved. Now, from now on, when I just hit these save buttons, it knows where it is. It saves it in 2 seconds, and you're good to go. Okay? Now, let's start building this thing. And the first thing we need to do is we're working on the GUI, or the interface for our customers, whoever's going to use this thing. And so we got to put some controls on there so that we can, first of all, show them the features and show them what the point of the application is. Then we'll go ahead and code it. So we need some stuff from the toolbox. If your toolbox is over here, you see this little thing, and you click on it and the toolbox comes open, then that's cool. You already have it sitting there. If you don't have that, go to the View menu and go down here to Toolbox. Okay? You can also add it to this menu. That's what I do. Click on this little drop down menu here and say Add or Remove Buttons. Look at all these things you have. I'm going to add Solution Explorer, and I'm going to add the toolbox. That's it. And then I'm going to click away from it, and now we have a button to get to the Solution Explorer, and I have one for the toolbox. This is very, very handy. Recommend you do it. One little thing that I want to change here, you'll see when I have when the toolbox is over here and I open it, I can't see a lot of the form, which drives me crazy. And then when you go to the form, you can't see the toolbox. So here's what I do. Click open the toolbox, and use this little push pin, this little guy right here, and that will pin it or lock it or dock it to the left side of the screen. You can still open this up if you need to, but at least it stays there. So I have the toolbox and I can see what I'm doing. When I'm done with the toolbox, I just close it. Then when I need it again, I grab it from this. Okay, that's what I suggest you do. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to put some controls on here, and I want to put in a text box. And there, again, there's no particular order in how you do this. We're going to try to build it just like I did the other one. So the text box goes here, and this is where we're going to ask them for their name. Then I'm going to need 4 buttons. Ways to do buttons. You can double click and a button will appear over here. You can hold down your left mouse button and drag one. And notice as I'm dragging, these little construction lines show up, and it shows me that I can align the left-hand side of the buttons, which makes it very nice. I can also make sure that the distance between them is the same too. So I'm just going to drag 4 of them over here. And you notice I say button 1, 2, 3, and 4 by default. We need to change that because that doesn't look very professional. Also want to show you that if you want to, You can lasso these guys. I just use the left mouse button and highlight them, and then I can go to the Format menu, and I can say I want to align them. I want to make sure all the left sides are the center, the right side. I can change the horizontal spacing. I can change the vertical spacing. Like I say, make it equal. Boom. And it adjusts all my buttons. I don't have to sit there and obsess over it. Very nice thing. Make the form a little smaller. We're not going to worry about changing the background color of the form, but if you wanted to, you just simply select your form, push F4, and on the properties where we were at before, if you come up here to the background color, see that? Then you can pick custom colors or web colors or whatever you want, and you can just select one, and voila, you have that. If you don't like a color, if you make a mistake, you push Control Z on your keyboard and it will undo things. That's just a standard Windows thing, and that's your best friend. Now, one of the things that you need to understand right away is that if I wanted to type something up here on the form, I want it to say, please enter your name or whatever, you can't just type on the form. It's not like a web page. So when I want to have something appear on the form like first name, last name, address, telephone, that kind of stuff, we use a label. So grab a label and put it over here, and I'm going to put it right on top right of the other one, okay? And I want you to go over to its text property. I'm going to click on it once. You got F4. It should say label 1. And we're going to come down here to its text property, and I'm going to double click, and I'm going to say enter your name here. Now this is exactly what we did before, and then I have 3 little dots. Then I hit enter, and you'll notice that your information comes right up here. If you want to change how it looks, then you can do that. You can change its foreground color, make it blue, whatever. You can change the font. I can change its size. Let's make it 10 point. So I make it 10 and hit enter. Now it's a little bigger. That's easier for me to read. And that's all I need to do with that one label. I'm not going to change the name of this label because we're not going to be referring to it in code. It's just simply there as a placeholder, so I'm going to leave it as label 1. However, I need another label for our receipt or for our little output light I showed you before we're going to use. So grab another label and put him over here. And this time what I want to do is I want to resize this. But if you click on it, you'll see there's no resizing handles. Let me show you how to fix that. So in your notes, under working with labels, you should have a new section. To resize a label, you go to its property. Right now it's label 2, okay? And you go to up here where it says auto size. You see that? And we're going to make that false. And as soon as you make it false, ta-da, I have these little sizing handles. I want you to make me a little label that looks like this, kind of like I did on the other one. So we have a nice box in order to print our messages. And remember, this is going to represent a receipt. I also, because I want you to make sure you remember that it's there and you see it, change its border style to 3D, fix 3D. Now it's not really too cool of a 3D, but it has something. And then finally, I want you to go down to its text property, and you see it says label 2. I don't want it to say anything, so watch. I'm just going to highlight it here where it says label 2. I'm going to hit the delete key or the backspace key, and it goes away. I don't want anything there. The last thing I want to do, though, is I want to rename it. Now, come up here to the top, and I want you to type in where it says name. I want you to change this. I want you to call it LBL, that's for label, receipt. Okay, and hit enter. Now, what's going to happen is in our code, we're going to be able to take whatever they type in this text box and print it out here. And we're going to use this name to refer to the label. Okay, that's how it's going to work. So I think we have that part set up. Now let's deal with our buttons. The first button is going to say OK, and that's going to give us a message box. So I want you to push F4 on here, and we're going to change its name. And all buttons are going to start with lowercase btn and just call it OK. That's fine. And then now go to its text properties so we can change what it says on the screen. And I'm just going to call it OK. I'm going to make mine all caps just so it looks a little better. Okay, and immediately it changes. That looks better already. The second button was print. And since we're already here with the text property, type in print and change its name up at the top to btn print. You'll notice that The name property is the only one that's not alphabetized. When you click on this button right here, this alphabetizes the properties, and this one over here puts them into categories. You see that? And I can never remember what the properties are, let alone what category they're in, so that drives me crazy. So I just alphabetize them. But they put the name up here so you could find it quickly, because you do change that quite a bit. And now let's go to button 3, and it is going to be the clear button. So I think what we'll do, we'll call it BTN clear. How's that? And go down to its text property and type in clear. Now you notice what I'm doing in these later versions of Visual Studio. When you want to change a property, all you have to do is select it and you can start typing. You don't actually have to double click it and highlight this stuff anymore, which is kind of nice. Hit clear and it changes it on screen. And then the last one we're going to do, it knows we're on the text property, just call it quit, so it's consistent with the other one. And just to show you that it doesn't matter what the name of a button is in relation to what it says on the screen, let's call this one BTN end. Okay, now remember, this is the name of the button in terms of how we're going to refer to it in our code. This text property is what it's going to say on the screen. It says quit, but in our code we're going to call it the BTN button. Okay, now I'm just doing that to prove to you that it doesn't matter, but you could very easily make yours BTN quit if you want to. All right, so now that we have this all set up, why don't we save everything, get in the habit of saving everything, and then running it and make sure we haven't messed anything up. And now at least we have our controls, and you should be able to type in your text box. The buttons should look like they're working, but they just look like they're working. They don't actually do anything yet because there's no programming instructions. So if you get this far, then we have an awful lot of it done. Okay, now go ahead and click the X here to stop your app, and let's start programming this pup. The first thing I want to teach you is how to close this particular application. So in order to do that, we're going to make what's called an event handler where we can write our code. Remember, in Windows, when someone clicks on a button, in this case, it's going to trigger what's called an event, and it raises an event, sends a message to the operating system and says, hey, somebody clicked this button on Kessler's app. I think you're supposed to do something. And the computer says, okay, what am I supposed to do? Well, we have to make a place for it to go follow my instructions. So to do that, the easiest way, it's not the only way, just double click on the button, and it will make what's called an event handler. Now when you look at my code, it looks very, very small. So I'm going to hold down my control button and scroll my mouse so it makes it a little bigger for you. I also want to show you how to change the fonts here, because I don't like those. That looks kind of ugly. I'm going to go to the tool menu, go to options. It's going to say fonts and colors. And for the text editor, see right here, and I can also change it for the printer, but I'll just change the text editor. I'm going to go down and I'm going to change this to a Verdana font so it matches all the stuff I do in class and all the stuff on my website. And I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bigger for my old eyes. I'm going to make it 12 point, and when it comes in here like this, it looks nice. But you can always hold down the control key and scroll your mouse to make that larger or smaller. Now what I want to point out here at this point is your window here that is opened up is called a code window, and it has a whole bunch of stuff in here that Visual Studio put in for us. Please don't go in here and start erasing things. But this down here where it says Public Partial Class Form 1, this is where all of the coding for our form needs to go. There's only a few things that you'll learn about that can go up here into this section where all these using statements are. We will put some things in there at some point, and we will put some things up here, but most everything we do will start here. So the beginning of our form is here, so all our code goes from here, and it goes all the way down to this block of code. In C#, they use these braces to identify a block of code. This is the beginning of the form code, and this is the end of the form code. This other one over here, this guy, is for something called a namespace. And the namespace just helps people keep their projects separate, particularly if you're working in a big company and stuff. Normally, it doesn't have anything to do with anything we do. But don't erase them. Don't change anything. Visual Studio made that for us, so just leave it alone. Then you come down to this other little section and you'll see we're on, there's another little thing called Form 1, and I have a Form 1 up here. What's the deal? Well, this is a special section of code called a constructor. And what it does is, you can see here, initialize component. It tells Visual Studio as soon as we launch our application, start building all the controls and putting it all together. And that's what initialize component does. All that stuff is built for us by Visual Studio. Don't erase it. If you erase it, nothing happens. It won't work. Okay? What we want to do is we want to look at these other little sections that we just made. And the first one I made was called btn_click. Would you make a note? This block of code is called an event handler. You can call it a click event if you want. But I want to stress to you the model of how this Windows thing works, and that is when you click on a button, it triggers an event. When they type in a text box, it triggers an event. Windows is going to come back and say, okay, what do you want me to do? So as a coder, okay, you're not a user now, you're as a professional coder. As a coder, you're going to say, well, I have to handle that event. I have to tell it what to do when someone clicks on the button. So this is where we put our code. This code, these instructions we put in here, will only execute when they click this button. Okay? We're going to have several of these, but the code we put in here will only run when they click this button. And this is why you always want to name your controls first, so this looks nice and so you can see which one you're working on. You don't want it to say button 1, button 2, and so forth. You can change those if you mess up, but it's much easier to name them ahead of time. Now, a couple things about C# if you haven't done it. First of all, it's a case-sensitive language. So I tell my students, just start typing in lowercase. You'll see why. And you'll see that this whole event handler starts off again with a left-hand curly brace, and it ends with a right-hand curly brace. So all the code that we want to have execute when they click on this particular button has to be located between these two braces. If you delete a brace, put it back in. If you have a left-hand brace, you got to have a right-hand brace to match it. All right, here's how you close a Windows application. You're going to type in a command and tell the form to close itself. But what I want you to do first, I want you to put in a comment, and in C# we do that with 2 forward slashes, and I was taught to do it like this. You don't have to do that if you want. I'm going to put in here close the form. Now that's obvious what we're doing, but I want you to get in the habit of documenting your source code. That's what this is, source code. So that when you come back and work on it 6 months from now, it'll be a reminder of what you did. You can also say left off here. So if you want to go have a sandwich, or you want to go out to dinner, or you're going to come back and work on it a couple of days, you save it, you can go in here and actually search for where it says left off here, or you could leave a note to someone else. If someone else is working on this, Tom, please fix this. If you have a problem with a project and you'd like Tom or Nathan or I to look at it for you, you send it to us and say, look at my note, and say this part doesn't work, and you make it a comment like this, and we'll find it, and then we'll try and help you with it. Okay, so that really helps, and it's very important to document all your stuff. So close the form. How do you close the form? In object-oriented programming, keeping in mind nothing really happens to our application until someone clicks on a button or they type something. The rest of the time the application is just kind of sitting there doing nothing, waiting for something to happen. When you want something to happen when they click this button, we first type in the name of the button or the name of the command. Now in this particular case, what I want to do is close the form. Well, you don't type in the name of the form. You don't type form 1. There's a very complicated reason why you don't do that. But what you do if you want to reference the form, you type in the word this. Now, as soon as I start typing, you'll notice what happened. A little cheat sheet comes up. It's called IntelliSense, and this will save you. Saves me all the time. Notice I started typing in lowercase. I just typed lowercase t and then h, and this shows up. Well, you can pick whatever you want. I'm just using the arrow keys. Okay, and then what I do is I hit the tab key to pop it in. Let it do that for you. All right, this, make a note in your notes, this refers to the form itself. And the computer is basically saying, okay, with the form, what do you want me to do with it? Well, let's look at our options. In order to look at your options, you do a dot. And this other thing comes up with this huge list of things that you can do with the form. And what I want to do is I want to close it. So I type in CL, and you'll see down here, and I do another, if I type in an O, here it is. Be careful. You have all these other things that you could get messed up with. On closing, on form closing, form close. Don't do that. Just pick up close and hit tab and let it pop it in, and notice it'll capitalize it, do everything for you. Close is like an action word. It's like a verb. So it's called a method. So all methods must have some parentheses after them, and C# in the editor will not put those in for you. You have to do that. Put them in. Don't use anything but the rounded brace, and then do a semicolon to mark the end of the line, and that's the end of the command. So what will happen is when someone clicks this button that I call BTN click, the very first thing it comes to is this command. It ignores all this, doesn't pay any attention to it. It's just going to come down to this first command. If we had another thing we wanted to do, it would do that. This is how you close a Windows application. So let's test it, but be sure we save all first. Always save, push F5, and let's test our new feature. I'm just going to say quit, and there it is. It should quit. Okay, so let's look at the next feature. And again, you can do these in any order that you want. Let's do the OK button. Now in order to do that, we're going to make an event handler for him. We're going to make that down here. Notice now we have two. Okay, I don't want the button, I don't want the OK button to have anything to do with this, so it's in its own little section. And even though these are next to each other, they have no relationship to each other. They're like sealed up inside these little private sections. Okay, so that's important for you to know. And I can move these around. I could take this one and cut it and put it down here if I wanted to. It doesn't matter what order they're in. You put them in the order that makes sense to you when you want to read it and take care of it. Now let's put a note to ourselves what we're going to do here. Here we're going to show a message box. I'm just going to kind of abbreviate it here. When they click OK and include their name. Come on. Okay, so here's how you show a message box. This is all built into Visual Studio. All you have to do is start typing stuff in. So in your notes, make sure you put how to display message box. Type in MESS and you see message box. That's what you're looking for. I hit tab, pop it in. Message box dot, and there's really not many options, but the show is the one that you want. Now show is a method, right? So it has to have two little hoochies, and it has to have a semicolon at the end. But the red squiggly means you're not quite done yet, partner, because when you hover over it, you get this big dialog box that says, hey, there's some things here that are missing. You got to add some stuff. Okay. Well, the first thing that Mr. Message Box wants is a message. So you have to put in what you want it to say, and those have to be in double quotes. So let's say this. Let's say, hi there. Okay. And then do a space so it doesn't all get mushed together. Do a space. And then come over here, and after your second quotation mark, put in a plus sign. When you're stringing information together like I'm doing, you're appending their name to this little sentence. It's called concatenation. Big ugly word that you have to know. But that's just what they call it. So you're concatenating things. What I want to put in here is what's in the text box, right? So no matter what they type, it's going to get added to this message box. So I want to take what's in the text box. So what I'm going to do is I want to grab what's in Mr. Text Box. Now I think what I did was I didn't rename Mr. Text Box. So let's go back and do that right now. Click on it one time, push F4. Yes, I was bad. See, I called it Text Box 1. Let's make it TXT name, okay? And hit enter. So that's cool. Now you see I have two tabs up here, by the way. One for the design, that's this, and then one for my code window. I'm going to hit save. I want to show you something. If you don't see those for some reason, you go over to Solution Explorer, and if you don't see Solution Explorer, click on your little thing there, or you go to View, Solution Explorer. Your form is under Form 1 CS. CS stands for C#. Double click on him and you get this designer. If you want to see your code, you can click on this little doodad here. That's what I do. or you can push F7, which I never remember to do, okay? Or you can right click on your form and say view the code, whichever one you like. I always use this thing, okay? Now let's go back down here where I was, and let's take the stuff from the text box. So we're going to say hi there, and then whatever they type in. Now hopefully, because I changed this name, it'll come up as TXT. So I've got TX, and Visual Studio says, well, I only see one object that starts with TX, and there it is, TXT name. Again, hit the tab key, let it put it in for you. Now in order to read something from a text box, we need to get the stuff out of what's called the text property. So do a dot and go down to text. I go TE and it sees text. I pop it in because it's going to capitalize the T for me, okay? And then what I want to do, I want to show you something else. I want to get rid of any blank space that they might have put in with their name. They might have put in Tom and then they hit the space bar 10 times. I don't want that. That looks bad. Let's keep going. Let's add another little feature to this and say dot trim. TR. There's trim. Now what trim does, you can see the trim in and the trim start. What trim does is it gets rid of any blank space in front of or in back of what they type into a text box. All right. Now, Visual Studio is complaining because it says you're not done yet, because trim is kind of like an action word also, right? Like close, and it needs its own little parentheses, okay? And once you do that, then it's happy. So you should see, just like in algebra, if I have two left-hand parentheses, one there and one there, I've got to have two matching right-hand parentheses. Make sure you put a semicolon at the end of the line or it won't run. Save all, push F5, and let's see if it works. We're going to type in some stuff. I just type in junk and type OK, and there it is like that, okay? But you'll notice that's not very fancy. There's no icon, there's no caption, so let's fix it up. Go ahead and stop this again so we can fix it up and go back into your message box section. The very first thing that the message box always looks for is the message itself. You have to do these in the right order or it doesn't work. I didn't design it, Microsoft did, so we have to play by their rule. So the very first thing is a message, and in this case I have a message, plus I concatenated what's in there. The next part though is, if you want, you can put in a caption or a title. So do a comma, because that's going to tell Visual Studio, hey, I want to add another thing, another feature, and we're going to put in double quotes here whatever you want it to say, and I'm going to say data entry 1. Okay, not very original, but there's where it is. I also want to tell it to put an OK button, even though it'll do it by itself, because I want to go to and change the icon. So put another comma, and I want you to hit the space bar, and as soon as you hit the space bar, Visual Studio says, I bet you want buttons. And look what it did. It highlighted message box buttons for me. All I got to do is hit tab, pops it in, and then we do a dot so we can pick which one I want. I want OK in this case. If we were going to ask them, are you sure you want to quit? Yes, no. Then we would pick yes, no. But just do OK. And then the final piece is I want to do another icon, an icon for them, and I want you a comma. And now it says, oh, I bet you want an icon. So you see it's pretty smart. It anticipates what we're going to do. Message box icon, hit tab, pop it in, do a dot so you can pick the icon, and I'll just do an exclamation mark. But look at all the options, okay? Pick the one that makes sense to your application, and then it's done. If you see red squigglies here, and I'm going to close this off so you can see this. If you see red squigglies and stuff here, it's because you have missed a piece of information. If I leave that out and put the button away, it's not going to like it. It has to have this sequence of commands in order to make the message box look correctly on the screen, okay? I also am going to show you a little trick I use, particularly in the classroom and on the website. I'm going to show you that you don't have to have your line of code really, really long, as I don't like scrolling left and right. That's a real pain. So what I'm going to do is, after one of these commas, and I'll just do it here, I'm going to hit the enter key and I'm going to break up this line. And Visual Studio is very happy with you if you do that. Don't break anything inside of one of these pieces of data. This data that you see in quotations, that's called string data. And you're just telling the computer, don't be trying to get the square root of data entry. Don't add it, don't subtract it, don't do anything. Just display it. That's what string data is, okay? So it could be a zip code, it could be an address, it could be a phone number, whatever, but you don't want to do math with it. You just want to show it as characters. But don't split it there, but you can certainly split it after that. And now that makes it a lot easier to read, and even when I make it larger for you, it is easier to read, okay? Let's save. Let's do a push F5 and do a quick test, and we're going to type in some junk. We're going to say okay this time, and voila. It has a little ta-da sound, it has my caption, it has my icon this time, and that looks better. Okay, now we're on kind of a roll, so let's keep going. Let's do the print button next. Again, you have to quit this. Go back to your designer. Let's double click on the print button. Now the print button, what I want it to do is I want to take whatever they type in the text box and I want it to show up or be concatenated to a little cheesy message I have in this label. Okay, so we're going to go from the text box to the label. That's very easy to get mixed up and make it go the wrong way. So that's what we're going to do. So if you double click on print, we have yet another event handler. So far we have three. An event handler for this button, an event handler for this button, and now an event handler for this button. Remember, the only time that these little sections of code or instructions execute is when this particular button is clicked. All right, so for this guy, what I want to do is let's make another comment to ourselves and just say this takes the name, and we hope they put in their name or whatever they type in, is, it doesn't matter, and show it in the big label, I'll call it, okay? So how we do that is we're going to say the label is going to have a new sentence in it. So you start with where your information is going. You don't start from the text box, we start from the label. So if I type in LB, it very quickly comes up and finds LBO receipt. Hit the tab, lock it in. Also, this is going to go in the text property, and Visual Studio knows that, so it's already found it for us. So all you have to do is hit tab again, and it pops in text. It's very sweet. Now this is going to be, the new text property in the label is going to be equal to whatever I want it to say. And so let's just put in a nice friendly thing. Say thanks for shopping. And then we want to put in their name, just like we did with the message box. Leave yourself a little space here. It's kind of hard to see. And then hit space after these quotation marks. Don't push them all together. It's easier for you to read. And do a plus sign. Always use a plus sign when you're concatenating. And then now we want to take whatever's in the text box. So we're going to type in the name of our text box, txt name, and we're going to tab it in, and we're going to say dot text, okay? And we're going to trim it just like we did before. Look, it remembered. See? Pretty smart. And you have to remember to put in the little rounded parentheses when you do this. Now in Visual Studio 15, look what they did. If I put in a left one, it puts in the right one for me. That is very nice. So every version of Visual Studio adds more and more stuff in order to save us some time. Now again, at the end of the line, ta-da, semicolon. Save and test. I strongly urge you to put in a feature, save your project, and then do your features and test it. Okay, there's the one for that guy. Let's test this guy. Ta-da. Thanks for shopping, Bob. And I could have put in a period there to make it look nice, but we won't worry about that. The quit button works now, so I can do that. And the only thing left is our clear button. So what do we need to do? I need an event handler for the clear button, so I'm going to, yes, double click. You guys watching the video can't hear what the students in class are saying, but I will try to tell you what they're saying when they say something important. Now, another comment here. Let's clear, we're going to do three things. Let's clear the text box where they put their name. Let's clear the big label. Clear the big label. Now that's the one for the receipt. And then finally, I want to put a blinking cursor and put the blinking cursor, it's called, into the text box so they can start over again without any big hassle. Okay, it just makes it really nice. So, first things first, how do you clear a text box? In your notes, how to clear a text box. If you don't know, you type in the name of the text box, txt name, and we have two options with text boxes. The easiest way now in the new versions is to do a dot and then do a clear. So would you make a note that in order to clear any text box, you're going to use the clear command. Now again, clear is a method, it's like an action, so it has to have the two parentheses and we do a semicolon. So that will clear the text box. Okay, that's the first thing it does. Then what's the next thing? We want to clear that big label. Type in the name of the label, LBL receipt. You cannot do clear because if you look for clear on here, you're not going to find one. Microsoft didn't make one. Drives me crazy. So in order to clear a label, write this down. You use the text property. Okay, so you're going to LBL receipt text, and we're going to set it to equal basically nothing, and then do a semicolon. What that means is the double quotes. See, if I did it like this, it would put all those spaces in the text box. Now you wouldn't see it, but you don't want that there, but you want nothing. So if you put two double quotes next to each other like that, it's like saying take whatever's in there and just mush it down to nothing, into what is called a zero length string. And then you do your semicolon. So please make sure you have it in your notes. You can use this method for a text box or a label, but you have only this option when you want to clear a label. Okay, so you can do whatever you want. I still think this is probably the easiest, but this one will work for a label or a text box because this is what we had for years. That's all we had, but now they made this. Now the last thing is I want to put the blinking cursor in the text box, but they don't call it the blinking cursor. Here's what they call it. Type in the name of your text box where you want the blinking cursor to go, do a dot, and what you're looking for is focus. So type in FO and look very carefully because there's a focus and a focused. You want focus. Focus in Windows means when a control has a focus, that means you can immediately type in it or hit enter. That's just what it means. So when you click on a text box, it kind of lights up with a different border. That means it has the focus. That means you can go ahead and type in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to programmatically tell the text box, you have the focus. That means people can start typing, and it's going to put the blinking cursor. Now let me ask the class, is focus a property, event, or a method? What would you say? Sharon, yes. Why do you think it's a method? Because it's like a verb. You're right. Okay, so that means I have to put the two little doodads at the end and do semicolon. Kim, focused. Focused is a method that you could use if someone hit the tab key and they went into the text box. As soon as the text box got the focus, you could make it do something. So as soon as they tabbed into it, and if you made a focused thing, you could make it show a message box or something. That's all it is. But so you're going to make sure you get the right one. Okay, remember now properties like text and stuff, those are characteristics. Those are very different than methods. Methods are actions. You're telling the computer, go do this, go do that. All right, hit save all. We're almost done, I think. Push F5. And now if we put in our name and we hit OK, Kim comes up in the message box. That's good. That didn't break. I didn't do anything wrong. The print comes up here and says, thanks for shopping, Kim. Clear clears this guy. It went and cleared the label, and then it put the blinking cursor there. And the quit button does everything we want. So in a quick review, when you click on an item, when you click on a text box, when you click on a button, you cause an event to get triggered, and that means there's a message. You don't see it, but a message is sent to the operating system, in this case Windows, and it says, hey, I got something for you to do. Somebody clicked this button, or they typed in the text box, or they moved the mouse, and I need you to do something. The computer comes back and says, what am I supposed to do? You can't tell from here, but there's a place in your application that tells the computer, come right in here to what Ron called the click event for this button, and then execute whatever's in there. So it's going to do that, it's going to do that, and it's going to do that. It does one miserable instruction at a time. It does it super, super fast. And then guess what? When it gets down to the last instruction, there's nothing for it to do. Your application just sits there, just like I did it before. When we hit clear, okay, it just sits there, waits for something else to happen. So behind the scenes, what's happening, Windows is going back and it's working on whatever else you're doing. You may be downloading a video, you may be playing music, you may be doing something Microsoft Word. It's going to go back and work on those other apps because this thing is not requiring any of its attention. When someone does type on it and they click on this again, it's going to send a message and it says, Windows, will you stop what you're doing for 2 or 3 thousandths of a second and come in here and help me out? And it says sure, and then it executes that code, and then it goes back and waits until something happened again. That's kind of the model for object-oriented programming. All right, now make sure that you save this somewhere where you can get to it so you can open it again. Let me show you very quickly how to open it. So I'm going to go File, Close the project. I open up Visual Studio again. I go File, Open Project, and I'm going to go to my desktop. Now that's where I kept mine. You go to the folder where you have yours. Mine is in CS Videos under Lesson 2, and remember I did it under the video, I think, and there it is, Data Entry Part 1 for the video. Now what you want to do is you want to open up that folder, and you should see a couple of files, and one of them has a .sln file extension. Okay, and when I double click on that, it will just come get that right away and open it up in Visual Studio and kind of leave me where I left off. If you don't see these file extensions, you guys, let me show you something here. And you Mac users aren't used to file extensions because they don't use them, but Windows uses them a lot. If I come up here to file extensions and I don't see the .sln, that stands for a solution file, okay? And again, all you do is double click that. You can right click it and say open with, and you can actually pick the version of Visual Studio that you want to open it with. So if you have Visual Studio 10, 12, 13, and 15 installed or whatever, you can pick whichever one you want. Okay, you come down here and find it. There's 12, there's 13, and you can say always do it with 13. You can pick whatever you want, okay? If you want to, you can also use the version selector, and it's supposed to be smart enough to know that you built it in 10, 12, 13, or 15, and if you do that, it's supposed to open it up in the one that you created. If you don't see these extensions, and it's hard to understand what's going on, the way you do that is you come up here to the View menu. Yours may be unchecked where it says File Name Extensions, and now you can't tell what it is except it has this little icon, okay? But you may not remember that. So you go to any folder, any file folder, and I happen to be in Windows 10, but they've had this for some time in 7 and 8. Click on the View tab and go over here where it says File Name Extensions, and I also urge you as a coder to go ahead and show the hidden items. Notice when I do that, I get some other things over here, and you're going to be a professional coder, you need to see where all the parts are. Okay, so as soon as I do that, you see the .sln. That's all you have to do is double click on it, and voila, it opens up your project. Here it is, and you should be good to go. All right.